good morning. It could be afternoon to you. And welcome to Woman of Faith. This is our third episode. My name is Jean. I'm here to tell you about the story of Ruth. It's in the Old Testament. We're going to try to take a woman from the Old Testament and a woman from the New Testament. And the first episode we did was with Queen Esther. The second episode we did was Mary, Mother of Jesus. And today we'll be bringing you the story of Ruth. How this relates to us as women, even though it happened a long, long time ago. There are many lessons. There are many things that we can learn from the Word of God. So I want you to sit back, relax, and think about your life. And see if there's anything in this story that you can relate to. And whether or not this is something that you can find some bits, pearls of wisdom that you can take with you. So we're going to continue now. It's a story. It's a heartbreaking story. It's a love story. It's a story about of tragedy, of mercy and redemption. So we're going to take you back into the land of Bethlehem and the surrounding area. It's around 1100 BC. And Naomi, who was with her husband and two sons, want to escape a famine that's coming on the land, and it's severe. And they have decided, her husband has decided, to take the family to Moab, which is probably modern-day Jordan right now. It's quite a distance away. And they're taking their life, and they're going to make a life in another location because of the famine. It's a very bold thing that they've done. When they get there, they probably settle in, they make their life, and then a tragedy hits. Her husband dies, and Naomi is found a widow. She has two sons who take a wife from the neighboring area, and in their custom and in their laws and traditions, they are not to take foreign wives. That's something that is a no-no. But they did take foreign wives, and I don't know, they might have had wonderful character. It was a situation. Whatever happened, it happened. But also, two more tragedies happen. Both sons die. And now we find three women, two young widows, one elderly widow. And they are now in a situation where they're going to have to fend for themselves, and they're bound by this love and tragedy. In your life, I'm sure, we've all lost people that are very close to us, and we've had to face that. And sometimes it takes a while, but we do make our way. One of the things we want to remind ourselves that God is always with us. Even when there are times of terrible sorrow, God is always with us. And eventually, the famine is over. And Naomi gets word that the famine is over in her homeland, and she wants to return. She's decided to return. But how does she tell her daughter-in-laws? She doesn't want them to come because she feels she's very considerate. She's a selfless type of a person. She really loves her daughter-in-laws, and she feels that it's best for them if they could stay in the land, be with their parents, their family, and maybe find new husbands and have children and make a life for themselves. And so she tells them that they are no longer obligated to her, that she really is going to go back home. She's going to die there, and she wants them to have a life of their own, and she releases them from any situation that she has that they may feel obligated to her. She sounds like a very special woman. Right now, she's a very hurt and probably bitter woman at this time. She's devastated. So she tells them to go home. And so one of the daughter-in-law, her name is Oprah, she decides that she'll take her advice. A lot of times when we've got to make big decisions, we do take the advice of an older person. We might struggle with it in our own mind, but you figured that, Naomi was trying to tell her what was best. But Ruth wouldn't hear of it. Ruth was going to follow her, and she was going to make her life with her. Whether Ruth felt that she was going to want to take care of Naomi, or whether Ruth felt led by God's Spirit that she really had left her gods behind. Moab was a very pagan area, and they were enemies of Israel, so they were in a little bit of a hostile area. But I would like to take you to Ruth 1 Ruth 1, 16, 17. She says a priceless speech or message she gives to her mother-in-law. I tell you, it really is very heartwarming what she says. In 1 Ruth 1, 16 through 17, many people have used this. It's well known in Bible references. But Ruth says to her mother-in-law, "Entreat me not to leave you or to turn back from following after you. For wherever you go, I will go. And wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people, and your God my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. The Lord do so to me and more also, if anything but death parts you and me." Well, I don't know about you, but I'm a mother-in-law. I'm a woman. I'm elderly. I mean, if I got presented that message, I would have to scratch my head and say, she may need to do this, even though I think this is best for her. This is something that maybe there's hope in another land for her. I really will go along with it. So I'm going to agree that Ruth will come with me. And so off they go. They return. I mean, how was Ruth feeling? How was Naomi feeling? How was, Orpah? She returned to her family. She had to make that cut with, her sister-in-law and her mother-in-law. It was probably a very emotional, trying time. What kept them together and now what separates them. Big choices, and so anyways, they return. It's quite a distance away, too, I might add. So when they return, we have Naomi, who has to face her people. Basically, she left pretty wealthy, and then she is coming back. She's coming back empty, poor, and bitter. And when they say to her, "Wow, no, Naomi, you're back," she says, "Don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara, because it's a bitter thing that happened to me, and the Lord has dealt treacherously with me." But we don't know, a lot of times we blame a lot of things on God. We know He makes the final decision for everything, but we don't also know the whole story. We know certain aspects of our story, and we go through despair. I mean, to live is to have loss. I mean, we go through despair. We go through problems. It's always, when there's joy, you can rest assured around the corner there's going to be problems and there's going to be sorrow. So here we have her returning. Little did she know that God is a redeemer. This is a story of redemption. And so God has other plans for this family. So they get there. Obviously, they're very poor. There has to be someone that has to get the supplies for the family. And Ruth is younger. Naomi is older. And so Naomi mentions to her that there is a relative, his name is Boaz, and he does have a field. And so Ruth asked her mother-in-law that she would like to go glean in the field where he is. what put that in her head. Maybe it was just a safer place to be. Naomi agrees that that's a good idea, and she also tells Ruth about Boaz that maybe he'll find favor with her. She probably wasn't thinking anything more than he's a relative. She'll be safe. Well, she goes out, and what they call gleaning back then is it's almost Israel's welfare system, you might call it. What they did when they had harvest is that they wouldn't harvest the edges of the field and wouldn't take all of the produce. They would leave it for the poor. And the gleaners would come behind, and they would pick off the things that they would need. And so, therefore, in God's way, he took care of his own, which he always does. So now she goes out she's a hard worker. She's young. She's going there to be the breadwinner. She's going to be the breadwinner. So she's working hard, and I'm sure there's a lot of other obstacles. Remember, she's a foreigner. She doesn't really fit in, maybe, at that time. Maybe she did, but she didn't feel it. Maybe she did feel it. I really don't know all the ins and outs, but let's know the facts. She may have felt like a foreigner. And even though she was with Naomi, she was still a foreigner. So she's doing her job, and for some reason, Boaz takes notice of her, and he finds something pleasing about her, and he decides that he's going to approach her, and he tells her, listen, don't go to another field. I've heard of your loyalty and your devotion and your kindness to your mother-in-law, and I find that you're a noble woman, and I would like to watch after you a little bit. So I'm going to provide a little safety here and some protection. And so he does tell some of the harvesters that the reapers rather, that leave a little bit extra for Ruth. Make sure she has enough when she leaves. So she does go home. She's very excited. She has good news to tell Naomi that, he did have a little favor on me, and she's very, very grateful that he now, is she's securing her livelihood a little bit. So she's excited about that. But I think Ruth has other ideas. She's excited too because a relative of her deceased husband. That means that he's a possible what they call kinsman redeemer. And what does that mean in today's day and age? Well, back then there was a custom that if a relative was willing to take a widow as wife and marry and have children, then at that time he could redeem her family's property. Now, one of the things, I don't know all the ins and outs of how that worked, but I do know this. Women had very few rights then. And so a lot was dependent on the husband, the man of the home, and Ruth has no husband. Naomi has no husband. And so therefore, who knows? He's a possible kinsman redeemer. Anything is possible. But Naomi also is a very wise person. She isn't publicly, she's not gonna do anything that would make him uncomfortable or anything like that. She's going to tell Ruth that, you know what? I want you to do something. I want you to wash yourself. I want you to anoint yourself and dress in the best garments that you have right now. I want you to go where he's staying. I want you to take note where he's sleeping. And then after he's had his meal and he's had his food and drink, I want you to watch and see where he goes to sleep. And after he goes to sleep, I want you to go there. I want you to uncover his feet and lie down next to his feet. Now that would be a little bit bizarre today, wouldn't you think? I don't know. I don't know if somebody told me that. I guess they knew the customs, so they knew the customs of the day. To us, that sounds very strange. That's something that we would say, what? Uncover his feet and lay down next to his feet. But I guess Naomi knows what she's talking about, because that custom meant that it was an invitation for him to be intimate with her. That was still his choice, but it was an invitation. Now, I don't know if Ruth knew that when she was doing it. She just simply obeyed. And so we hear, what was she thinking? I don't know. What was she thinking? Maybe Ruth did discuss this all with her, or maybe she simply just went and obeyed. So I'm thinking about this. I want you to, let's go to Ruth 3, 9 through 11 and see what he says. Because he could have said anything at that point. Remember, we all have choice. Most of the time we have choice. Anyway, so it's chapter 3, verse 9 through 11. And he said, so this is Boaz talking now. He says, "Who are you?" So she answered, "I am Ruth, your maidservant. Take your maidservant under your wing, for you are a close relative." So she knew what she was talking about, and he knew what she was talking about. They knew the customs of the land. And then he said, "Blessed are you of the Lord, my daughter, for you have shown more kindness at the end than at the beginning, in that you did not go after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear, for I will do all that you request. For all the people in my town know that you're a virtuous woman." That's interesting. So obviously, not only did she find favor with him, she found favor with the townspeople because of her actions. A lot of times we make decisions, don't we? And it seems like, at that time, well, it seems like the noble thing to do, but it doesn't seem like it fits. But if you do what's right, God always comes up behind you and takes care of you. So now for the rest of the story. Together, they have a son. His name is Abed. And he's the grandfather. He becomes the grandfather of King David. Wonderful King David, who the people loved. King David, he had a lot of problems, but he was a God after God's own heart. And he was forgiven and he was praised, and he wrote many of the Psalms in the book that we know. So through David's lineage, we have also Jesus Christ is born. And so he's the Savior of the whole world. He's the Savior of the whole world. In a way, a kinsman redeemer, isn't he? When you think of it. So you see, God knows how to deliver people. He knows how to redeem people. We have to trust, even when we don't understand. We don't understand the situation. We're confused. Maybe we need a little advice. It really doesn't matter. We have to trust. Because you see, God knows and sees the value and the worth of a woman, even in a world that maybe does not always see their value. So that's really the story of Ruth. But what I would like to do now is talk about some of the things that would apply to us and how possibly we can relate in our life. We have choices that we make. Some of those choices, they're good. Some of those choices are not that good. We come to each turning point in our life and we do the best we can. Hopefully we ask God for his direction. That's always a plus. When we do it on our own, our strength can wear out. Our strength can really be expired. We can be at the end of our rope. But God gives us renewed strength. So let's talk about the choices. We know our choices really determine our destiny, and they create our history. Look back now at some of the choices you made and how you got to where you are. Some of them were good choices. Some of them were better choices. And maybe they were wise choices. You either took or maybe you didn't take. But you know what? We have to ask ourselves this question. Do we really listen? And are we willing to act when we hear God unexpected call in our lives? That unexpected call can come anytime. It's that small little voice inside that convicts you that, you know, this is the right way to go. Maybe even it's against all odds. Maybe it's too complicated. But you know what? We have to follow the leading of the Holy Spirit. And if you call on God, He will not let you down. But I want to tell you something about the story of Ruth and the redemption and salvation situation. I mean, when you really think about it, Ruth was an outsider. And as an outsider, she was kind of grafted into Israel. And, you know, as Christians, as Gentile Christians, we also are outsiders. And we've been grafted into spiritual Israel. That's a big key there in our life. So Ruth takes her place in history as a foreigner, and the town people say to Naomi that Ruth, in Ruth and chapter 4, they say Ruth is better than 7 sons. Now, if that's not a legacy, let me tell you, I don't know what is. She was a very noble woman. So traditionally, the book of Ruth is read every year on the Feast of Pentecost, which is a holy day. That's been done for centuries. So Ruth has made her mark on history, in history, and we take a lot of lessons in life. We can learn from Ruth. What can we learn? We can learn that, one, God will take care of you. God will take care of us. That if we look to Him and if we trust Him and believe Him and believe that we are children of God and that He listens to us, He will take care of us. And in this book, we see love in action. You know, a lot of times in our world, we see a lot of talk, but we don't see love in action. It's better to see love in action than to hear about it. So it's a beautiful love story when you really think about it, how a tragedy turned to a redemption. And I'm sure they had a beautiful love story. And they were a whole brand new family, and they started a whole new life. But they turned grief and sorrow was turned into a wedding celebration with joy in life. Think about that. How God can just turn things upside down, inside out, and when you least expect it. So after her days of despair, all of the woman days of despair, and even after some of our days of despair, after all, Naomi lost 3 important people in her life, 3 key people in her life. They're surprise blessings. So God will take care. He loves you, and if you love Him, He will take care of you. So I want to talk about, we live by faith and not by sight sometimes. And so life is about choice. Think of all the things that happened to you from our choices. For instance, Ruth left everything. She left everything. She's a foreigner in a new country. She's got a new home. She's got a new religion. Somehow she must have seen with Naomi's actions and with her husband's actions and her brother-in-law actions that the God of Israel is the true God of the universe. So she must have, that had to rub off. That had to rub off. Anyways, sometimes there are certain days, very uncertain days, and they require, uncertain times in our life, they require great faith, very great faith. And Ruth had it. Ruth had it. And so she made radical choices, very radical choices. You too probably have made some radical choices in your life, or will make some radical choices in your life in the future. I want you to know that back then, rights of women were practically non-existent. And so therefore, a lot of the rights that we have today, we've taken for granted. But not so in the situation that Ruth was in, I believe. And let's not forget Boaz. Boaz had a choice to make too. He could have rejected Ruth. What did Ruth have to offer him? I mean, did Ruth have a lot to offer him? I mean, she didn't have wealth. She didn't have many things. He also had to overcome that he was marrying a foreigner. I mean, there was a lot of things in play. But anyways, the gist of the story is this: don't be afraid to take a risk. If God is for you, no one can be against you. So let's take a little closer look at the situation. I just couldn't help but think that, you know what? Remember that song, O Little Town of Bethlehem? When I was putting this together, that kept popping up in my head. O Little Town of Bethlehem. Bethlehem, where Naomi was from and returned. Bethlehem, where Ruth and Boaz had their son. Bethlehem, where King David was born. Bethlehem, where our King Jesus, Christ, was born. The Redeemer of all mankind. O little town of Bethlehem. It's amazing. Sometimes the little insignificant things that we see add up to a big awareness and a big overcoming and a big mark in our life. So I want to say this. I want to say thank you for listening. Mama Jean saying goodbye for now. I want to close out and just tell you I enjoyed doing the series about Ruth, and I look forward to another episode. And what we'll do is we'll close for now. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.